I'm joined by Deanna Lankin in this episode, and we have a rich conversation to share with you around daydreaming and accessing the Theta state. She's an incredible artist. Definitely check out her paintings, and a gifted soul whose wisdom and knowledge is bound to expand your perspective on your human experience. I'm excited for you to discover new ways in which you can gain deeper insights and understanding of what's possible through what we share. I want to start in a way where I first want to share what I really appreciate about sitting with you. Like anytime we get together, I find myself accessing the many dimensions more easily. Like
Hmm.
I really enjoy when people have a deeper sense of the multi-dimensional reality of in which we exist in, because when I'm in the presence with someone like that, it's just like, oh yeah, it's like we get to talk on many different dimensions, even though we're just, using our voice here. We're also connected in these different ways. And I really am excited to weave that into the podcast because that's
Hmm.
what I want people to recognize is like we are more than just this physical structure having a conversation here. There's so much
Hmm.
more happening at the same time. And I find when we're around people that have more I feel like we all have access to it, but when there's more conscious awareness of it, it
Hmm.
allows people to tune into that same frequency or
Hmm.
tap into more awareness of that within their own field. So that's one of the things I want to invite people into in our conversation is like notice what else you might be experiencing that's beyond your own physical experience because there's so much there for us to pay attention to. So I'm just really
Hmm.
grateful for conversations with you because we do get to like weave in so much more than your typical conversation involves. So I'm excited to bring that into the podcast and yeah, bring also your wisdom of yeah, daydreaming, the mystic worlds of guides,
Hmm.
of intuition, and wherever our conversation goes today.
All of that good
All
stuff.
of it, all of it.
All of it. Yeah, I feel the same way with you, Nicole, like getting to talk as well. Like it's almost like you just get to like wiggle around and like, I don't know, like all like even we just looked up the etymology, like the root of the word escape. We were just talking about words and like the cloak aspect, where it's like we do have to go through the world. It feels like sometimes like a bit cloaked. It's like that mask that like Carl Jung says that we wear,
Yeah.
and it's like sometimes the cloak just like we don't even realize it, but it feels a bit tight. And then we get to have conversations and it's just like, oh, like it gets loose and
Yeah.
you can just kind of stretch out a little bit more.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
yeah, we get to take up more space and
Hmm.
be seen in a very different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's always more fun. Like it
Exactly.
always, always, always translates to
It
like
sure
more fun
is.
happens. Yeah.
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 Because the
Absolutely.
human experience is so fascinating. Then the more we expand into it, that's it. It's exactly that. It's fun. It's fascinating. It's
Exactly.
yeah, yeah. It's so cool. So to start, I actually want you, Deanna, to share a
Mhm.
little bit about your journey. And what I'm really intrigued about is like, how was it that you really, because I feel you really embody your intuition, your deep knowing, your connection with the mystic world, with your guides. Like, I'd love to know a little bit about your journey of really embracing that and living it, living
Mhm.
from that place.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty common theme with a lot of people like ourselves who have been more on that seeking kind of quest throughout our life, where I was a very sensitive kid. Like I had a lot of experiences seeing ghosts or having like I guess what you'd call like paranormal experiences, like outside of the kind of five sensory experience. I had a lot of stuff happen when I was little, and because I didn't have any reference for what was happening, I didn't really have anybody to go to. I would like tease out little bits here and there, but I don't know, like we didn't have the internet. There weren't, people weren't talking about like, so for example, I used to wake up in the middle of the night when I was little and there'd be two cloaked dudes sitting on my bed or on the chair in my room, like beautiful
Mm.
brown, really thick, like cloaks. And I would just be absolutely terrified. There's like two dudes in
Understandably.
my room, right? Like,
Exactly.
what are you guys doing in here? And I'd run downstairs, and then of course it's like the parents, like I had very loving, supportive, considerate parents, but then obviously they come upstairs and they're like, there's nobody in your room, go back to bed, and like tuck me back in, whatever, rub my back, help me fall back asleep. But now I know who they are, and they were my guides. They were watching me while I was sleeping. So I
Mm.
was just in that little bit of a, and they sometimes would even be like, oh my God, she can see us. Like they're like that's
Yeah.
so that was my childhood. And then I think it just got more and more uncomfortable, and I felt a little bit more alien about having a lot of those experiences and not feeling a sense of belonging with them in my like peer groups and in life. So as I moved into my teenager world, I just sort of like so many of us like shut them down.
Hmm.
Little bit of like, drugs and alcohol, like just kind of whatever it took, and like really squeeze that door shut. I was like, this is not welcome. I don't want to feel like this anymore. So then when I
It
was
makes
in
me think
my
about the cloak, right? It's like, oh,
totally
put that cloak in on tighter and
zip
tighter.
it,
Like,
snap it,
exactly.
like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, this is a
Mold into
no
what I
fly
need to
zone.
be so that I'm
Totally.
accepted or welcomed in this community versus, yeah.
It's crazy actually. This is actually going to come back around to a cloak that is kind of funny. This is a really weird coincidence. So I was in a car accident when I was in my like kind of mid 20s, and I sustained a vertebrae injury in my neck. And it was like a partial disability.
Yeah.
So I was about to go move through the rest of my life without being able to do how I'd identified myself in the world. So I'm an
Mm.
artist. I wasn't able to paint anymore. I wasn't able to drive anymore. Like there were just, many things in life that I was never going to be able to do again because it was like a irreparable. It was just like a spinal injury. There was no surgery. There was nothing that they could do. So I went into a pretty serious funk. About a year later, I had started experiencing like depression for the first time in my life. And
Mm.
that was really, I have a lot of empathy for people who struggle with depression. I just had like a little vacation in it for a minute, and holy shit, like it's no
Yeah.
joke. So that was a thing. And then my family decided to go to Hawaii to kind of just like get me out of the West Coast where we live. Like it was a really particularly rainy winter.
Hmm.
And I woke up one morning in Hawaii, and I was half asleep, and I was sleepwalking, going outside kind of as the sun was coming up, but I was conscious that I was sleepwalking.
Mm.
So I'd never heard of this happening before, but I felt really good. I was just overwhelmed with this extremely like benevolent, loving, comfortable, kind of carried feeling. So I didn't try to stop it while it was happening, but it was
Cool.
as if I was sleepwalking, but I knew, like it was like I was in the back seat of my car.
Yeah.
Something was driving the vehicle, but it was good. So I went with it, went and sat in the backyard, and then as I'm sitting there was approached by this energy who presented as like this male figure who felt very like angelic to me.
Hmm.
And this whole conversation played out. So it was like I was dreaming, but I was awake. I was still aware of the yard and the palm tree and the sun coming up. I could hear the birds, but this whole scene was playing out, and they were perfectly overlapping. Like I didn't know where
Hmm.
one stopped and the other one started. And during this conversation, we decided that I wanted to let go of my neck injury. And it was a really beautiful conversation because I didn't realize that I actually was having a hard time letting go of it.
Yeah.
It's surprising sometimes, when that kind of stuff comes up. And then the man in this situation was like, okay, like here we go. And he sort of put his energy behind my neck and pulled forward and pulled the injury out of my neck. And then I woke up. So that was it. It was just over. I'm just right back to, and then it's like, holy shit, like, why am I sitting out in the middle of the backyard? Like, it was
Yeah.
very odd, but I got up and my neck was healed, like 100%,
Wow.
like gone, and
Yeah.
it never came back again. So that was really the beginning of it for me because it turned into a pretty passionate, bordering on obsessive, like, what the fuck happened? Like, what was that?
Understandably.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What was that? I got
Yeah.
to come home, go to the doctor, pull up the x-rays, just like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
This is, what happened. And so that really led me on the path. And then I tripped over hypnotherapy.
Mm,
My really good friend who lives on the other side of Vancouver Island had somebody coming to visit who did a 2-day workshop. And she convinced me to come down. And I tried it out and I was like, this is it. This is the spot. This is the, like, as soon as we went in, like, he brought me into the state,
yeah.
which I was very resistant to. Like, I thought hypnotherapists, like, did you remember that you would come to like your high
Oh
school
yeah,
and people
100%.
would
And
be
put on
doing
those
like super
performances.
crazy stuff?
Yeah.
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 So I was like, okay, like, what is this nonsense that like I'm getting up to with this friend of mine who's always signing me up for nonsense? But I didn't understand what it meant. And all it meant was just dropping me into theta, which is just a brainwave pattern. It's one brainwave, like wave pattern right above sleep. So it's
Mm,
like usually like we wake up, we're in theta for a bit, then we go into like alpha and beta all day long.
right.
And then we can go into theta and then we go to sleep, we drop into delta. So
Right.
that's it. It's just somebody relaxing you into a state of theta.
Which
And
is the state you were in when you shifted out of that. Yeah.
yes. So I didn't know what that was, but as soon as we got in there and as soon as it started to kind of take off and I was like experiencing things in that state while I'm talking to him,
Hmm.
I was like, that's it. This is it. So I
Yeah.
trained with him. I learned how to do it. And then a whole bunch of really interesting things took place. But the moment when I decided that I was going to be me here in my
Hmm.
full embodiment, because it was like a climb to get to the point where I was like, okay, like I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this all the way.
Yeah.
I was wearing a black cloak and I
No
had to
way.
take my cloak off. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah. Yeah. I was in it like in training. And yeah, I was like, I remember it was winter time. I was in Ontario. I was old and kind of bitter and stuff, and I had this huge black cloak on. And then it was just like, if you want to be this, you got to take it off.
You
And
have to
yeah,
take the cloak
I had to
off.
take
That's
this cloak
so
off.
cool.
So yeah.
And that's one thing that really stands out to me in what you're sharing is like the the recognition of like trusting and stepping into the choice, right? Like even when you were holding on to the neck injury and not quite ready to let go of it, I can think of many people, myself included, where it's like there's fear associated with letting go of something or no
Mm-hmm.
longer associating as something. It's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm no longer this, then what? Right? Like, who am I if I'm not all these survival patterns that I find myself in? Or, who am I in this potential state? Like, I don't know who that is, and that's too scary. So I'm gonna stay with my cloak on because this is how I know how to move through the world. And to me, that's what this journey is it's like the loosening of that cape of
Mm-hmm.
of of what we are holding on to as an identity when it's really rooted in survival or rooted in beliefs that are rooted in fear usually, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and when we're able to take that
Exactly.
cloak off, like how free that must feel, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to even invite people to consider like how tightly the cloak might be on, how how limited you may be from letting yourself fully be free. And it
Mm-hmm.
makes sense, right? Because we are so comfortable in those states that outside of that feels scary and unfamiliar, and there's all kinds of things entangled with it. But
Mm-hmm.
even right now, as we're talking, I can play with like the idea of that cloak being a little less tight and just the freedom that I feel in that idea is so beautiful. So I wanted to invite other people to play with that of like, okay, A, how tight do you feel that cloak is? How hidden are you
Mm-hmm.
keeping yourself? Or how contained or how, protected it can show up in so many different with so many different purposes versus when there's a bit more space there or there's the readiness to even let it fall off of you. Like notice the edges that you can reach and what's it like to stay in the discomfort of that and see
Mm-hmm.
what happens next. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's like a big consideration too to know that like I whipped mine off. It came
Yeah.
off. Like I
Yeah.
dropped it, it was gone. But what it was gone for was for my perception of myself in truth.
Mm.
but I still put that cloak back on all the time.
Hmm.
It's like there's so many situations where I don't even realize I've done it, and it's just there. And then
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, like what are you doing there? And I think what you said really, really hits the nail on the head, because we all experience resistance. So it's like if
Hmm.
there's this river of like, the goal is always to be going downriver and like going with the flow. And then we end up in this experience of resistance. But I think what we societally don't have a lot of, maybe like empathy, sensitivity, or communication around. And like I remember the first time really thinking about it was listening to a Sarah McLachlan song. It was one of her sadder songs from that really beautiful album that she had that was like the black cover where she's sitting on
Mm.
the chair. I think the song Angel was on that album. And
Right.
she's the main course of the song is she's saying, I don't know how to let you go. So
Mm.
I think that a lot of us reach these moments where it's just like, hey, I get that I need to let this go. Whatever this is, I have to let this go. But that does not mean that we know how.
Exactly.
And we can hang on to something for 5 years or like 5 decades longer than we should, knowing that we should let it go because we quite literally don't know how to do it. And I think that that shame is that last line of defense. But the shame that's keeping us hanging on to it is very specific to us and our relationship to the thing. And if
Hmm.
we can't identify what that one tiny little key is that's going to unlock it, then we don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And I think to me that's the benefit, really, like in a nutshell, of daydreaming, of tapping into that theta place, of allowing that information to meet our conscious mind. Because once we know the how, well, it's easy to let it go.
Yeah.
And I just don't think we have a lot of like compassion in our societal practices. Like, when somebody's in a shitty relationship and they've been talking about it for years and years and years and years, and you're like, dude, just like drop it.
Yeah. Easier said than done. Thank you very
they
much.
they don't know how yet.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
piece hasn't quite landed, and it's you. I don't believe that you can seek that out externally. I think the universe can like breadcrumb and drop books and films and songs and moments of grace and information in front of us all the time, but if we're really actively seeking out the key,
Mm.
it's like that, it's that just part of the resistance.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know
Yeah, it's
yeah.
almost surrendering has to happen for the key to arrive. Or not, and how I speak to it is like we get caught in the trying to fix. We get caught up in thinking something's wrong with us. We get caught up in that, and that just creates more conflict with the resistance. Because the resistance, like, no, 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 I can't change without this resistance or this survival pattern or doing what we know how to do. We're gonna die here, right? And it's if we're in conflict with that and trying to find the answers, we're not going to get anywhere. But the more
Mhm.
we acknowledge the resistance and can create that space for the resistance to be there, we also create more space for other information to come through.
Mhm.
And then it becomes easier to
Mhm.
navigate. We're not trying so hard.
Yeah, because when we're in resistance, part of our mind is always going to be fighting for it.
Yeah,
So you're
exactly.
battling, like it's yeah, like even once you realize you're having it and you're like, hey, like something's got to change here. Like there's a certain percentage of our brains that are like actively like making excuses for it. And
Yeah,
it's like a very multifaceted experience. It's
it sure
never
is.
simple.
No, it sure
No.
isn't.
Yeah.
So let's then talk a little bit about this theta state because I have lots of questions. I haven't done, I mean, I know I enter that state, but I don't know very much. I just know what I've experienced, but I don't have much knowledge around it. So I want to speak a little to the daydreaming and entering that theta state and accessing the keys or how the keys can kind of, present themselves the more we open up into not just the theta state in daydreaming, but also open ourselves up to the many dimensions that are present and how we can receive or be in different, how do I want to word this? it's like the more we see the multidimensional reality that in which we exist in, and the more we're able to access something like that theta state, the more we see the bigger picture, right?
Hmm.
And there's less of the need for the cloak. To me, the cloak feels very third dimension world. How do I survive
Hmm.
this? Whereas when we welcome more information through the theta state and also through the multi dimensions, it just, I don't know. I know I feel just more. Mm, I'm having a hard time finding the right words for
Hmm.
it, but more
Receptive, like,
receptive and free. Like there's more freedom in the way I move.
well, I can
Yeah,
tell you exactly what it is. And
perfect.
it is
Thank
a
you.
very specific feeling.
Yeah.
So there's two ways of experiencing life here. And one of them is under the cloak of the illusion that we're separate.
Mm, hmm.
And then there's the experience of us as wholeness and connected to the intelligence of nature, which means that we're in a co-creator state. So
Yeah,
you're either
beautiful.
under the cloak of separation where like you've forgotten and life is happening to you, or you're in the perception state where you're co-creating with it. So
Beautiful.
it's the creative state. So you're either creating with it or it's happening to you. There's nothing in between. It's
I
one or
love
the
it.
other.
Yeah,
And I mean it's not possible this, well, I shouldn't say it's not possible. Everything's possible. It's not common or even useful, I don't think, to like expect that we can stay there 24/7 because
yeah,
like I get to die and go back there. I came from there. Like
exactly.
that's a rad state of being as well. But like I'm here doing this like super fun dance. So I don't want anybody to ever hear that like I threw my cloak off and I'm running around down here. Like, it's like it comes on and off. Like, I mean, I was laying in bed this morning thinking fully cloaked thoughts, caught myself doing it. I mean, I went on a run with it. I took it
Beautiful.
into like
Gotta love it.
four different layers of life. Like I went from relationship stuff, brought it into money stuff, brought like I mean, and it happened in 5 minutes, It's quick when it happens.
Yeah,
I caught it and then it was like and then leveraged, I'm gonna go back into like a daydreaming state before I get out of bed. Cause I know if I get out of bed in this whatever cloaked thought state, like
yeah,
my day is gonna feel quite different. So yeah, I don't want to ever like let people think that they need to be in any sense of like shame for
yeah.
not being able to like hang on to it. It's not the point.
Exactly. Not at all.
We just want to
And
get
th
our bounce back rate a little bit more elastic if we can.
exactly.
That's
And
it.
that's where the practice of actually pausing and noticing that we're in the thing, that we're
Yeah.
cloaked, or we're how
Yeah.
I call it survival patterns or in the vortexes. The more we're able to pause and notice we're in it, the
Mm-hmm.
more we're then able to explore how we can then create more space around it. And
Mm-hmm.
because we are both of those things, right? We are the
Mm-hmm.
chaos, we are the individual, we are, you know, the vortexes, we are cloaked, and we're also
Mm-hmm.
whole.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we can
Yeah.
pause to notice which we're connected into, then we have more choice. It
Yeah.
might not always feel that way when we're deep in it,
Yeah.
or we don't yet have the knowledge or the tools. But
Yeah.
it's pausing and noticing to me, like catching yourself in it
Yeah.
is the biggest practice of them all.
Yeah, and I think that there's two parts to this. And the part number one is like understanding the mechanics of what's happening. And it's super easy to understand using the model of like say that we're like a computer and life is like a video game. If life is like a simulation, which is just like a really weird way of looking at it, but it's the easiest way to kind of explain like how it's happening is
Hmm.
that my brain is a computer and my heart is plugged into the creator of the game.
Mm,
So I get to have this awesome computer in this experience being in the game, but it is not who I am. It is a functionality like a software program. So it can get programmed either consciously through me in alignment with my heart, or it can get conditioned by bringing in external information throughout my time in this game. So we all have programming in our software from childhood, from experiences, from whatever, that's often in competition with the heart access, where if we're in that heart state, that's when we're in that like co-creator status mode. So theta, well, before theta, we know that if we don't sleep, we'll die, which doesn't really make any sense. Like, why do we need to sleep? And the very simple explanation is that in order for this computer to function, it needs to data dump.
Mm.
So we've pulled in so much information throughout the day that if we don't dump data, this won't be able to continue functioning. And then it will stop doing the automated involuntary functions of like making sure that we're breathing and our, hearts are beating and all of our organs are functioning, right?
Yeah.
So when we sleep, we do a data dump. And then when we're dreaming, like a lot of us, I don't know anybody who hasn't experienced a dream or a situation where they could not figure out what to do. And then they went to bed at night and they woke up the next morning and they knew what to do. It's like the grandma, like just sleep on it kind of like wisdom that like elders often give us. And then also the experience of something coming to you in a dream and making something make a little bit more sense. So our heart plugged in to the creator of the game, the intelligence of nature that all of this is built around, it communicates with us while we're asleep because we've moved outside of the software and now we're just in the field, like we're in the universal field. So then we're in our expansiveness that exists outside of the computer software in our brains. And then we can pull in information from there. So that's delta, that's full sleeping. So theta is just one brainwave function above delta. So we're not fully back up in the software brain yet.
Yeah.
We're holding on to the software up here and like holding on to the heart down here. And you're experiencing both simultaneously. So that's all theta is. And we go in and out of it all day long. So that was like when you were a kid and you're in the backseat of the car and the trees are whipping by and you kind of like, you go into that, like what we would think of when we think of daydreaming. But when you turn a movie on at night and you forget that you're sitting on a couch in a living room, like holding on to like a mug of tea and like suddenly you're just like in it, you're in the story. Same thing, reading a book, you're in theta.
Right.
The problem is that we spend so much time in theta allowing in external data. So you're programming your software in theta. So if you're watching like a shitty, stressful movie, you're basically like, you're taking that on. Your nervous system in theta can't negotiate the difference between reality and what you're taking in. So it's hard on that's why you'll produce like your adrenal glands will fire watching like a stressful like zombie show. It doesn't know that it's not happening to you.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is that we're now living in a time where we're taking in more information in one day than a person 200 years ago would have in their entire lifetime.
Yeah.
So I would submit that sleep's not enough anymore. That data dump at night probably isn't enough. And that's why there's more and more and more movement to like mindfulness, to meditation practices, to like actively, consciously entering into these states. Because in order for us to maintain like optimal functionality, it would make sense that we would need to be like dropping into it more often.
Yeah. When you say data dump, what do you mean by that? Like we're dumping or we're sorting through what's important information, what's not? Like, what do you mean by data dumping?
So a sorting happens. And it's like if you took in like our brain is pulling in information from all of our sensory systems. So what we saw, what we heard, what we experienced, what we learned, and then it's in an omnipresent way. So when you go into like a regressed state in hypnotherapy, you can go back to the day you learned how to walk and you can look at the clock on the wall and tell me what time it was. Because our sensory system isn't dependent on just our five senses. So like our heart, for example, it's like a field that can be generally anywhere from 5 to 20 feet around us. And it's always taking in information. So that's why it's like if you're so frazzled that like you set your keys down, went to go out to your car, came back in to grab your mug of coffee to bring with you, and you don't remember where you put your keys 5 minutes ago, it's part of you does, You
Hmm.
just can't access that part because you're spinning so fast up high in this, energetic bandwidth that like you just need to like kind of slow that brain down just a bit to like access it. So every night the sorting happens where it's like, hey, like obviously you don't need to like hang on to all of that, but it's not lost.
Yeah.
It's just going into like a hard drive.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Gotcha.
you wake up in the morning and your software program is like ready for another day.
Yeah.
But then the
Assuming you
hard
slept well.
drive, assuming you slept well, but then the hard drive will slowly like continue to consistently store information. I think they
Mm.
did a good job showing like a depiction of it in that movie Inside Out.
Yeah. Yeah.
The yeah, where the emotions in the brain and they go like the little kid where her imaginary friend Bing Bong
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
like down in that world or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
It's
like
all there, but it's
it's all
just,
there.
yeah,
Yeah.
stored. It doesn't have to be in.
And it never is going to go away. Like
Yeah.
even that's why when in hypnotherapy you can enter into that world of like pulling up past life information, stored life information. Like we
Hmm.
don't know what it is. It could be like my genetics remembering my great 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 ancestors memories.
Hmm.
We have no idea what's going on. And I
Yeah.
think anybody that tells you that they do, it's just like that, like watch out for that because like we really don't know what we're accessing.
Yeah.
It's just that when we go in through our heart and we access actively in daydreaming, access that information, it's always 100% of the time helpful.
Yeah.
That's all we
Exactly.
do know. So whether it's our subconscious plugged into the field showing us imagery that it's made up,
Hmm. Doesn't matter.
it doesn't matter.
It's still information. I
Mm-hmm.
know that it, this, I don't know much about Theta, but I feel like I work in the Theta realm all the time.
All the
Like
time.
that's where I'm always gathering information, and information comes so easily to me. And that's what I want to invite people into recognizing is like, do you relate more to being in that heady space, that busy, you know, not really aware of what you're experiencing, or
Mm-hmm.
are you more aware of your experiences? And then from there, can there be more of a welcoming into trusting whatever information comes? And
Mm-hmm.
we'll talk more about accessing the theta state in a sec, but it's like just trusting whatever shows up is something. And then we make our own perspective. We,
Mm-hmm.
we create our own perspective of what that means, right?
Mm-hmm.
And,
Exactly.
and, um, something that really stands out to me in that theta state is it's like, it doesn't have to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also what I'm curious about with your own opinion around this is like when we're working in the theta state and something comes up around something that happened in the past, whether it's our lifetime, other lifetimes, ancestral lifetimes, and we work with it in a way, at least this is what I do, and I believe this is what you do. We work with it in a way where it transforms, where the story shifts. There's the thing that we were stuck in that we may associate ourselves as or to, or
Mm-hmm.
that really limits how we move through life. When we work with that piece and there's a transformation, are we storing a different memory in our hard drive? Are
You're
we
rewriting the
rewriting it?
code. You're
Okay,
rewriting the code. You're
right.
rewriting the game. You're changing your reality.
Yeah. So
You're
the
going
it's not,
back into DOS and you're
yeah,
literally like delete, delete, and
recode.
you're
Yeah.
recoding. Yeah.
So what that means to me is that the hard drive actually doesn't have to store all the same memories. Those memories can transform and the memories can be different. Or possibly we can hold then more realities. It's like maybe the old story still exists, but there's then this recognition of a whole nother game can be played here. A whole nother programming can exist. It's not just this one programming.
Well, yeah, and the hard drive exists outside of this dimensional bandwidth. So that's like a lot of people have words for it. Like I've heard it referred to as like the Akashic library. So
Mm-hmm.
like the old story is still stored.
Mm-hmm.
It's just no longer informing this video game, this
Great.
simulation.
Yes. I like
You're
that
kind of
description.
you're
Yeah.
recoding this game, but like that book with that story, and like I think you really said it properly because it's I would wonder how much the story is even changing. It's just your perception of the story,
Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm.
it's like that one moment where we all hopefully have an adult life where you go from kind of like blaming your parents for all of your problems.
Hmm.
And then you have that, whether you're 20, 30, 40, or 50 years old, you have that sort of epiphany where you're like, they were doing the best they could, equipped with what they had access to at the time. And
Yeah, the
that's
real
such a
knowing of that.
massive, like
Yeah.
perception, perspective shift,
Yeah.
and it's like, it's not really changing the story. You're just looking at it through like a different lens. And that different lens is how cloaked is the perception. It's like, are you
Exactly.
right close up to it and you're in the hurt place, or are you pulling? And I think that that's where that concept, and it can get slippery with people that spend too much time in these outer bandwidths where they get
Hmm.
bypassy.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's where somebody will be going through some shit. And somebody's like, well, and they're just
Yeah.
coming at them with like a perspective that's 40 bandwidths away. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, 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 okay. Like, you
And
know.
that's, I think, the art, at least to me, is how do I understand or see as many perspectives as possible, not
Mm-hmm.
just lost in,
Mm-hmm.
one or the other, one extreme or the other. It's like the more I can understand all perspectives that are possible, the more grace I have for all human beings, no matter what they choose to do in life. Doesn't mean I have to be
Mm-hmm.
okay with it, but I can
Mm-hmm.
understand the different perspectives, and that's very different than bypassing and, oh, whatever, it's all good. Or, being so caught up in the anger and the blame and the victim, whatever it is. There's so many things we can get stuck in. But
Mm-hmm.
to me, like what an incredible place this would be if we all expanded our ability to see things from many different perspectives and have more understanding with how people navigate life,
Mm-hmm.
because they might have a very limited perspective on what their reality is.
Yeah. And I think it really, what's fun is it doesn't matter, because it's like this experience that we're having. And some people will spend a huge part of their life wanting the experience of the roller coaster of the
Mm,
cloak, and like really feeling it all out and like kind of getting their ass handed to them.
yeah.
It's like that might
Hmm.
be, and then maybe their kind of role that they came down here to do in this simulation in the video game is to be a little bit less of a co-creator and more of a like, I'm gonna frazzle you guys up a little bit while I'm
Yeah,
down here. And I don't know, it's like,
I
from
like that.
how I've been shown it, I think that that's where that humility comes in, where you realize more and more that like everybody's just doing a different thing. And because I had the very strange experience of having a moment where I was able to see all of my lifetimes outside of time and space when I was in one of these states,
Mm.
um, they were all happening simultaneously. And some of them seemed like pretty mundane. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
there
Yep.
wasn't a whole lot going on. There wasn't a lot
Yeah.
going on upstairs. There wasn't, but there was a
There's
key
a
there.
purpose. Yeah.
There was a
Yeah.
purpose and there was a key, and it didn't seem like much. But when you look at it from the overall perspective, it was an integral key, and it's me.
Hmm.
So it's like, that's like, if I'm out in the world and it's like somebody's really stuck doing donuts in a parking lot in their head and they just don't want to move past it, like the more time you spend in kind of, I look at it like going to the gym. Daydreaming's like going to the gym of practicing this.
Mm.
It's like, and I think in the world where people are talking a lot about manifestation, and the asking it is given kind of like whatever what's the book, like the key,
Ugh,
I
I'm
forget, it was
so
like the
bad with
big
all
book
those
about it.
stuff.
I know.
Yeah.
I think what people are really forgetting is that it's like watching somebody, it's like watching a movie with somebody like Thor in it, and he's been at a gym working out with a personal trainer for 6 months to look like that. And you're like, oh, being strong matters.
Mm.
And then I want to be strong like that perception of whatever strength means. But that's great. And that might be serving him in whatever way it's serving him in his life. But you still have to go and practice it.
Yeah.
Where to me, the
Yeah.
daydreaming's that it's the practice of experiencing these things. So then we can move through the world and really just enjoy it a little bit more. But
Yeah.
the very important piece to me about life that I think people can get away from a lot when they move more into these spiritual seeking realms, especially when there's a lot of drugs involved
Hmm.
and they're not accessing it through their heart, they're accessing it through external enhancers,
Yep.
is that life's not fair. And it
Yeah.
never has been and it never will be. And I wish people kind of like kept that piece plugged into this particular simulation we're in. It's very, very simply not fair down here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm allergic to people being like, we're going to create this utopian thing where everything's fair all the time. And it's like, all you have to do is look out the door and watch nature. And you're like, holy fuck, like that.
Yeah.
It's
Well, and
gnarly out there.
it's also like, what's our definition of fair,
Mhm.
right? Like, what
Exactly.
is, I think
Yeah.
that if we can change our definition of it's not fair down here, then
Mhm.
it's just, it is what it is down here.
Mhm. Yeah.
And we will have many, many different experiences.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think in this daydreaming practice, especially when it starts moving into the manifestation side of things, where you want to start actively co-creating and actively, choosing a little bit more of like your reality
Hmm.
by changing your perceptions and perceptions. I think there always has to still be room for, if somebody like lost their child tragically, the
Yeah.
concept that like they fucking manifested that, it's
Yeah.
like,
Come on.
like
Yeah.
go fuck yourself. Like that's not how,
Exactly.
it's not fair
It's not
here.
how it works.
And
Yeah, exactly.
we do have like a bit of co-creator like abilities and like in experiencing this very contrasting thing that we all chose to experience,
Yeah. Yeah.
but the contrast is the contrast.
Yeah.
It's
Totally.
it's here and it's happening to everybody all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's all, how I see it as well and it's all there for us to learn something through
Mm-hmm.
if we choose, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's the opportunity for growth or evolution through the lack of fairness,
Mm-hmm.
through being here.
Mm-hmm.
That just, yeah, I think that's what excites me about when things
Mm-hmm.
aren't fair or when things are
Mm-hmm.
difficult or when things are challenging. It's like, well, what also excites me in the difficulty is it's an opportunity, whether
Always.
if I choose,
Yeah.
because, yeah,
And even if you don't, it's still an evolution.
yeah,
So that evolution's never, it's still a comet hurtling through space on fire, like moving forward,
yeah,
whether you're actively participating in the perception of it or not, it's
yeah,
happening on our behalf all the time. But then
exactly.
it's so fun when you have the ability to like look around and go, like, I just had somebody that I care a lot about the other day remind me of the concept of like the silver lining. And it made me
Mm,
actually want to be like, where did that come from? Like,
yeah,
why
good
is it
point.
silver?
Yeah,
Is it because clouds almost look silver on the, I don't know. I was kind of curious about that. But
yeah,
it's like you get, it's, I think that's what this, like going to the gym of daydreaming is just so that when we do get dealt a card or a card comes up, from our conditioning where you're holding it in your hands and you have that ability to just look around a bit,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
be like, where's the silver lining or where's the
yeah.
opportunity or where's the growth or where's the whatever.
Which
Yeah.
makes me come back to like the importance of pausing and noticing. The more we are able to practice that, the more we're able to create more space around what we're experiencing and see
Mm-hmm.
more of what's at play versus, many people are just in the vortex of it and then the practice of being able to pause and notice you're in the vortex and chaos of it all and being able to actually create that space that, you know, that's not there yet. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the ongoing practice, at least it is for me,
Yeah.
ongoing practice of creating the space to see what's at play.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that pause button. Like, and that's something that I learned a lot from you. And when I've done work with you before, it's, yeah, it's really about the pausing because that
Yeah,
looking around and that reflecting and the asking and the realizing, like that
yeah,
all comes secondary
exactly.
to just pausing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's speak a little to actually shifting into that daydream state because I'm sure
Mhm.
people are like, okay, keep talking about it. And I kind
Mhm.
of know it because, I know that I've been there before, that state in between sleep and awake. But is there anything you want to share around, yeah, accessing that daydreaming state or
Mhm.
playing in those realms?
Yeah, it's an innate system that we all spent our entire childhoods in. So we all existed in theta until we were like 8 years old. And then we started spending more time outside of it in alpha and beta. So it's innate in all of us. There's nobody on the planet who's like even better at or worse than at it.
Mm.
And it's always right there. It's
Hmm.
like the veil between here and there is fluid. It'd almost be like when you see light streaming through a window, it'd be like you could just put your hand through it. So the
Yeah.
veil between the two is not some like tactile, tangible thing that you got to like kind of punch through, but it feels like it because there's that density to the emotion of guilt and shame are
Hmm.
the two big ones. So it's like if you think of an aquarium where we're usually used to living like up in the air, like up top, but then you want to get into like there's a treasure box at the bottom of the aquarium and you want to get in there and like open it up and kind of poke around. A lot of the times, especially if we haven't practiced this in a while, and meditation's not the same. Like when we're talking about meditation for more of like a mindfulness, empty your brain Buddhist kind of, it's like the clearing the head. It's like the
Hmm.
space between thoughts. When I say daydreaming, I mean very specifically going into your heart. It's like when you're a kid and you're daydreaming and you're in your imagination, you're accessing your heart's frequency. You're accessing the brain in your heart. So our hearts actually have like receptors in them the way that our brain does. It is
Hmm.
a thinking center. So it's not the same as just sitting down and trying to clear your head.
Yeah.
This is dropping into the heart. So when you're trying to access that trunk at the bottom of the fish tank, a lot of the time there's a skim, there's a film on the water, and there's a little bit of resistance of going into the water because you're going to have to go through that little bit of the film, and the film has feelings in it. So if there's
Mm.
a little bit of backed up, some stored grief, some stored shame, some stored whatever. So I think first and foremost, it's just having the courage to know that, like, you know, it might feel like something for a second. And then it's just what's our comfort in feeling things. So my easiest access to daydreaming that I have found, and I do have like a PDF. So I don't know if there's access to like my email address or something like that I can just
Yeah.
send. Like if anybody wants this written out in like a PDF format, like I've written it all down,
Awesome.
but it's basically entering into your heart. So anything that moves you into heart space, um, which can even be actively getting your heart rate up. So
Mm.
going for like a brisk walk or going to the gym and then doing repetitive patterns. So you're either going to access it through almost going to sleep and having a nap, or you're going to do it by doing repetitive left, right, left, right, left, right, and get your heart rate up a
Mm.
bit. And then headphones in and music that makes you feel emotional, that's not going to be like changing too rapidly. So I made a playlist on Spotify called Heart Key. And again, anybody can go access. So it'll have anywhere from like the score to like, Jurassic Park that nostalgically sometimes like makes us all feel a thing, or just heart hurts frequencies in general. And then the other really good thing to listen to is birds chirping,
Mm.
because birds chirp at a really high frequency, and our biological bodies are wired to feel safe when we hear birds chirp. Because if you're walking through the woods and the birds are chirping, it means there's no predators around.
Mm.
So as soon as the forest gets quiet, you're like, oh no, like
Yeah.
what's around the corner.
Yeah.
So it's the listening to the external thing and then the getting the heart rate up. So my super conductive state is in a bathtub or a sauna, especially the bathtub.
Mm.
I'm in water. Water's like, it's emotionally receptive.
Yep.
The heat's got my heart rate up. I'm laying down, my spine's straight. The straighter your spine is, like the better that kind of, I don't know why, the mechanics of it seems to work better when your spine's straight. And then having that music playing. And then it's just a state of allowing.
Mm.
So when you break through the meniscus of the heart, for me, often it'll almost feel like my eyes are welling. There's
Mm.
just this moment of like, so if you're having a hard time getting in there, just pick one thing you're just deadly grateful for, and picture it in your head. So for me, if I go into the tub, put the music on, and I picture my daughter's hands, something about in my head seeing my daughter's hands does it for me. It
Mm.
just puts me right in the center of my heart. And then once I feel that little welling of emotion, that's it, you're in. So you can come in, you can think, you can think thoughts and think annoying thoughts and think shitty thoughts. Like they can still come and go, but like as soon as you have that feeling, you're in the field. And then it's just allowing your subconscious, however your subconscious shows it to show you whatever it wants. And in the
Mm.
beginning, while it's getting going, it's going to look like really disconnected, weird little pieces. And then the fastest way to get that really like pulse starting kind of a like a generator is to say them in either your internal monologue or you're saying out loud, where you're like shoelace, gravel, boot, tree branch, chickadee. Like, you know, you're just, it doesn't really make any sense. But when you're consciously saying what your subconscious, it's like, it's just the chasm gets smaller and smaller
Mm.
until this happens. And then it's like you're watching a movie. And
Right.
that's it. That's it.
Cool.
That's the process. Yeah. And then after you've like practiced, it's like going to the gym, right? Like you're going
Yeah.
to suck at it for a minute. It's going
Yeah.
to be like disjointed. It's going to feel awkward and whatever. But once you get practiced at it, you can go in and out of there all the time, whenever you want
Yeah.
to. And it's always helpful. Yeah.
When you're working with clients, do you feel like for me, for example, because I haven't tried what you're suggesting, I feel like I can just access information when I'm working with clients, for example, or if I'm inquiring into my own experience, but I'm not just in theta. I'm also in beta and alpha. I'm again, I don't know much about the states, but like working with someone, I'm here while also receiving that information. Do you
When
think
you're in
that's
theta, you're there. Yeah,
okay?
you're still there. Yeah, that shit's all still firing.
Right. So I can
So
be
that's the part of your
conscious.
head that's just like boot, key, branch. The fuck is this? Like I don't get it, you know? Like that part
Right.
of your mind or you're like you and I talking right now is
Yes.
like totally still functioning. You just
Yes.
have access to your subconscious. That's
Right.
like so when you're in theta, you could still do all of the above.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And then would you then say that like accessing intuitive information is us gathering information from that theta state, or would you say that's different?
Intuition really simply means like that we're pulling in data through our heart from the field, from the
Hmm.
universal field, right?
Hmm.
So we have that ability to have the one-to-one conversation with that and pull that intuition in um like consciously,
Hmm.
but we can also go out into the world and get knocked by it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
I've had experiences like where I've gone in a regressed state, like in a theta state back to my childhood and actually like it was me knocking on the window doing that thing. That was
Mm-hmm.
me now going back and doing it. So it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, there are, you know, energies working on our behalf that can, you know, give us
Yeah.
the little flicks and be like
Messages.
over here or
Yeah.
whatever. So the most exciting thing is when you consciously go into that daydreaming state and your subconscious gives you some ridiculous thing,
Hmm.
just some silly thing where you don't understand what the point of that was. Like
Yeah.
I'll have 20-minute daydreams and all I'll get from it is just this like silly, like an anchor from the Titanic. And I'm like, that was what? That's ridiculous. And then later on that day, totally, I'm out in the world doing my thing, whatever.
Yeah.
And then something will come up where like I'll see like an anchor. And like I go over to it in the gazebo, like in town when I was like dropping my daughter off for school. And it looks like the same anchor, like same color, same whatever. And then I read the plaque and I didn't realize that the boat was owned by the same person who owned the Titanic.
Huh.
So like I'm reading the plaque and I'm like, that's really weird. And then while I'm standing there, somebody goes by. So now I'm like, okay, this is, and then it turned into this like absolutely incredible opportunity. But I just happened to be standing beside an anchor reading the plaque, like when it happened.
Right.
So it made me know to pay that extra bit of attention. So
Yeah.
that's that makes life feel more like an adventure because you're getting these tidbits from below
Yeah.
and then you're experiencing them out in the world and that now you're just playing like
Playing the
it's
game in
so
a very
fun.
different way. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily like by daydreaming, it's not like you're going in, because for me, if I'll sometimes sit and information will come through and I'm busy like processing some past trauma or intergenerational piece or whatever
Mhm.
it is, that doesn't necessarily that's not necessarily always the intention of daydreaming. It's like
Not
daydream,
always.
receive information. Sometimes
Hmm.
your that information leads to you processing something, moving through
Hmm.
something, gaining different perspectives of something. Other
Hmm.
times daydreaming is simply just invitations. And if you choose to listen to those invitations, it's allowing you to play the game in a different way or to see more of the possibility of what can be
Hmm.
happening within the
Hmm.
game. Yeah.
Yeah, it really depends. And your subconscious will get really good at showing you the variation. So for me, for example, when I was trying to do like a traditional meditation practice, as soon as my brain would get clear, and my mind would actually, and I would feel that kind of floaty meditation feeling,
Hmm.
I would often like have this experience where I would almost like see or perceive like a dragon.
Mm.
And I would get so annoyed with myself because I'd be like, fuck, like I'm trying to meditate and my imagination keeps like interrupting me.
Yeah.
And then after having the experiences learning and being in hypnotherapy and learning more about theta, and now I actively consciously allow my imagination to talk to me when I'm about to go do one of the things like you're mentioning, where like we're gonna go clear some stuff up and like
Hmm.
we're gonna go do a thing. The dragon always shows up because that's my signal of like, hey, get on, and I'm here for you. Like the feeling I have
Mm.
of that dragon makes me feel safe, protected, supported, all of those things.
Yeah.
So then I know that it's okay, like
We're going that
we're going to
direction.
go look at
Yeah.
something and it's going to be hard for a minute.
Yeah.
But because it's my subconscious, it knows it's the exact right time to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's never
Yeah.
inappropriate. It's never going to
Yeah.
freak me out or mess me up or traumatize me, or it's me
Yeah.
showing me
Exactly.
what me wants me to know
Yeah.
in my
Exactly.
highest good.
Yeah.
Like this morning, it was super cool because I'm working through some stuff and I'm having some resistance and I can't figure out where it's coming from. So then I'm sitting in this state and a door opens and comes up some stairs and it's like this big cloaked, jaggedy, like almost looked like a wraith.
Mm.
And I was like, is this death? Like who's coming up the stairs? But instead of what's it called that death has, this sick?
I don't even
I
know.
don't know how to
Yeah.
pronounce that word. It was a big pickaxe. So
Huh.
this dude, and I was just like, who are you? And he's like, I'm guilt.
Oh, interesting.
And I was like, hey, buddy. And then he was being funny. And he's like, my pronouns are pick and axe. And he was like showing me his pickaxe. Like it's such a weird, like when you're in that daydream state,
Uh-huh.
it's like, what is this? And then he was helping me understand that I was really struggling with guilt. And I got like kind of teary because I was very plugged into the feeling and the
Mm.
overwhelm that I was having. And I said, well, what is guilt? Like, what are you? And
Mm.
he said, guilt is an unspoken truth. That's all I am. I'm just a truth that you haven't spoken yet. And he's like, say it. And then I was crying and I was like, and I said it. And then right away felt like that feeling of relief because it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it
Yeah.
never is. It's just that we're so scared of it for all the reasons.
Exactly.
And I was scared about hurting. I don't want to hurt. A lot of times we don't want to hurt people,
Yeah.
and we felt that if I say that truth, it's going to hurt someone, but it's
Yeah.
not.
No.
And then I felt this feeling and it was like the opposite. And then he was like, it is the opposite. And I was like, so the opposite of guilt is, and he said, pride. He's like,
Mm.
so I was like, well, what's pride? And he said, acclaimed truth.
Oh, ho, ho.
And I was like, well, isn't pride like one of the seven deadly sins? And he's like, no, that's something totally different. We just have the same word for it. That's when
Ah.
somebody's like, trying to control it or they won't leave like a ego. It's like an
Yeah.
ego pride as opposed to a heart pride.
Yeah. Totally.
So
Totally.
now I get to run around in the world and claim my heart's truth around this situation because I'm proud of it as opposed to hiding it. So it went
Whoa.
from guilt to pride. And I was like, thanks, buddy. And then I just like got up,
Wow.
So it's
Yeah.
like that's kind of that's how simple it can be sometimes. And it's
Yeah.
so specifically designed for me,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah, because it's
It's
your own
tailored.
programming. It's your
Yeah.
programming. It's your
Yeah.
information coming through.
And
Yeah.
it's like that Sarah McLachlan song. I don't know how to let you go. I don't
Yeah.
even know what guilt is. I know I
Yeah.
have it, but I don't even know what it is,
Yeah.
you know? And it's like this, because they're just words.
Yeah. Well, their
Yeah.
words and their experiences, and until we expand our perspective of understanding what other
Mhm.
possibilities exist, all we
Mhm.
know is what we know. So to
Mhm.
create these opportunities where we get to expand our awareness on, okay, I know what this is, I know what that feels like, but what's the opposite of that? Or what is a little less of that or a little bit more of that so I can see more of my experience and
Mhm.
understand more of what's possible through that. Yeah.
Well, and would you say that that rings true with you? Like, if you go back to moments in your life where you've experienced guilt, would you be able to like apply the concept that like there you had a truth in your heart and it was like an unspoken truth? That it was something in your heart that like you felt you hadn't brought into the light yet, or you hadn't been able to say it?
Yeah, I mean, I need to sit with that a little bit because
Yeah.
pride is something actually I'm per personally working on right now,
Mm.
is like letting myself feel pride, um, or experiencing pride from others as well.
Mm.
Um, so you naming it as the opposite is guilt is making me also in this moment see, oh, right, it's like I'm guilty of the pride. Like I feel guilty of having pride, so I don't let myself feel it.
Of course.
Right?
It
So
makes
then
so much
there's this
sense.
like, oh, now I have another word to put to it is like notice the guilt so I can also notice more of the pride. That both
So
can
somewhere in
exist, but
there,
how?
yeah. How?
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's like a little truth in your heart and it's like claiming it. And
Yeah,
then it's like that, like
exactly.
the feeling was I was actually excited to go out in the world and like hold it up and be like,
Yeah.
I'm actually really proud of this thing
Yeah.
that 5 minutes ago I was hiding. I
Yeah,
was hiding it
exactly.
away.
Because it didn't feel air quote safe to show that I had it because I had guilt towards having it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah. So cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love
Me too.
it.
Yeah.
So one piece I still want to speak to is a little bit on like, okay, I'm experimenting with daydreaming. How do I recognize the difference in between daydreaming and fantasizing? And then also using daydreaming or fantasy as an escape versus actually really using it to gather information and still be here.
Mhm.
So let's start maybe with the difference in between fantasy and daydreaming, because I think that's important to differentiate.
Yeah, words are one of my favorite thing, and I'm always looking at the etymology of words. And like we just looked up fantasy, and it means
Hmm.
to make visible the imagination. So an imagination is like our inner imaging, right? It's like the imaging playing on the screen in the back of our like if we're a computer,
Yeah.
my imagination is what's showing on the screen inside of me, as
Yeah.
opposed to what's happening out in the simulation.
It's my
So
perspective of what's happening. Yeah.
yeah, well, my imagination is like the video that my subconscious is playing just for me.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And then that's relatable to other people because it's being informed by the universal field. So it's usually archetypal in nature, which is why we all feel like really good when we're watching like archetypal artwork, like all of the kind of those like fairy tale sort of whatever. That's all been informed by artists from projecting their imagination. So they've
Right.
created fantasy. So fantasy is when people are like basically like showing you their
Mm.
inner um
Worlds.
yeah, their inner visuals.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think the fear of getting maybe like lost in it, and it's a very real fear because if you are experiencing and imagination comes naturally to you, or for me when I open back up to it, it feels really good when you're
Hmm.
in there,
It's a great way to escape reality. It's a good
it
way to
feels good.
change our
You're
perspective.
supported in there. It's
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah. So
Yeah.
all of the things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then it's just like, I mean, I definitely went through a period where I would rather hang out there than I would in the rest of my life.
Hmm.
And it looked like me wanting to lay in bed until noon every day because I could go in and out of it like all morning long. I
Yeah.
started wanting to go to bed earlier. I started wanting to nap more. I'd go and want to have baths more often, or like wanting to just drop into it and prioritize it. You know, and it's like, I think as soon as for me, I started recognizing that I was kind of prioritizing it, or I started sharing about it
Mm.
inappropriately. I
Mm.
started prioritizing it conversationally where I was like, yeah, like just I would be too like yammering about it too much to
Mm.
people that really didn't have any business like hearing my inner heart truths and imaginations.
Yeah.
And then imbalance, right? I'm escaping and I'm just oversharing.
Yeah.
So then now my lines are all blurred. And I think it's
Yeah.
like anything else in life, you know, it's like food, you'll die without food, but then you can abuse the shit out of it,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
I
And
think
that's
it's the
where it's
same
like
thing.
totally noticing the quality in which you're doing it and how it impacts your life gives you information on if this is rooted in creativity or rooted in that experience of survival, that individual, you know, experience we were talking about earlier. I know for
Hmm.
me, for fantasy, for example, like I got lost in the illusion of what I perceived in the fantasy to be my reality when it was in no way my reality, right? And I think a relatable way to look at that is like when we're dating someone and
Mm.
we create an illusion of what we perceive them to be in our own minds, right? This fantasy of what we expect or think they are, or, and I mean, I'm using dating as an example. This can be applied to anything. And it's kind of like I got lost in that when the reality was very different than what I was creating in my mind. So
That's
that to
really
me,
interesting. I kind of want to tease that out a little bit.
mm,
Okay, like you're dating somebody and you have a story
hmm
that puts them on a bit of a pedestal. Like you've seen their potential, maybe not even a pedestal, but they've shown you their potential, and then it's making you ignore
exactly. It's kind of
behavior.
like you get caught in the idea that it's something that it's not, or you get caught. I got caught in the fantasy of like, I think it's this, but they're on a very different page. Um, so for
So,
me, it wasn't pedestal. It was more just like I'm only seeing one piece of what's happening. One.
and what informed the story of the potential?
Yeah, good question. I, yeah, is it my own perspective of what I saw, or is it what I truly saw? I mean, this situation, the only way I could untangle from it is to create or not create, tune into the reality of it in another realm. It's
Hmm.
like in another realm, that potential that I felt exists and is happening, but here it's not. Like that's the only way I could untangle from it. So
Okay.
it's something in the like seeing the potential, feeling the potential, but in this experience, that potential doesn't exist. Or the
So
choices
I
that were made didn't allow it to
didn't
exist.
allow it to exist. Okay, so I think, like, if I'm seeing this properly, I would
Mhm.
submit that the difference between daydreaming and what you're talking about is you were, in fact, creating a fantasy. So a
Mhm.
fantasy is an external projection of something that's not reality.
Real. Yeah,
It's not
exactly.
real.
Yeah.
So whether I'm watching Alice in Wonderland or reading Alice in Wonderland, it's not real, but because it was being informed by the imagination of Lewis Carroll, either through his own daydreaming practice or through, you know, mushrooms or LSD or whatever was going on there,
Yeah.
there's going to be universal truths within it because it was coming from his imagination.
Mhm.
Where when I'm relating to your story, I'm dating some guy and he showed me his potential. He
Mhm.
said it. I'm
Mhm.
listening and I believed him. Or I
Mhm.
saw a couple of moments of behavior, but then I'm ignoring a lot of other information. Those are all kind of like externally, you know, it's like what it's just kind of like what you're paying attention to and what you're building this fantasy on pieces that you're being given. That to me is not the same thing as you. So I have a story, and I've actually done this before
Mhm.
where I've been confused about this exact and very thing. where I'm like, I don't understand how to let go of the potential of this situation or the potential of this person. So then I went into daydreaming to bring this like query forward and go like, where is this for me? What is
Yeah.
my truth? What is my role in this? And what my own subconscious showed me was reality. You know,
Mm,
it showed me the situation in the way that I didn't really want to see it.
yeah, which
So I
makes
think
sense.
what you're talking about is like building a fantasy off of some blocks, ignoring other blocks, where
Totally.
that's not the same as tapping into our imagination.
Yeah.
Like if you brought that story into your daydreaming
Daydream.
and we're like, daydream, like
Give me some
what,
more
and
information here. What the hell?
they would have eaten the shit out of that
Yeah,
story.
a hundred
They would
percent.
have dismantled it to pieces and been like, "Meh,
Yeah,
that's not it." So I don't, that they're not the same. Those are not the same
perfect. Yeah.
things. Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to kind of support people in differentiating is like, when are we simply opening up to daydreaming and receiving information versus
Mhm.
creating stories within our own fantasy or in our own imagination? But they're like, to me, what I experienced there was very limited. It's like I'm gonna only look at it and become creative in my fantasy around it in this small area, but I'm not gonna look at the actual reality of it. Whereas in what I'm
Yeah.
hearing in Daydream, it's like, let me see as many perspectives of as I
You're
can.
playing God as opposed to accessing your internal God.
Yes, beautifully, beautifully differentiated. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You're trying to control the narrative as opposed to like
exactly.
co-creating with your potential to like
Yeah.
be realistic.
And
Yeah.
that's where I think even in fantasy, like fantasy, we could be trying to control, to,
Mhm.
escape, to create a different reality because my reality is not what I want it to be. So I'm just creating that as a way of escaping versus fantasy as a way to access creativity in my internal imagination and let stories arise from that. Like that, like it's like fantasy has many different ways of being, well, or yeah, it's like we can be in the creativity of fantasy or we can be in the escape of fantasy. And to me, those feel very different.
Yeah, and I think it's dangerous territory that I personally as an artist love mucking around in.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I love it. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, I think that that's a fun, I personally enjoy kind of tethering that rope. And it is dangerous because when you're creating fantasies that aren't real based on like the wanting to control part and trying to learn those differences, it's like you are a little bit creating energy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just like
100%.
if you're creating a distorted story, not based in your inner reality or in what's actually like real in reality,
Yeah.
you're building a distortion
Yeah.
and it's gonna have an effect
Yeah.
because
Exactly.
it's like you're making noise out in the field and
Yeah.
yeah, it is real like because we're making it so. So
Exactly.
eventually it's gonna come around and whatever.
Interrupt interrupt us in some way because it's yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that that's where I'm excited to move more. Like my artwork is starting to become more internally informed.
Mm.
Um, and I find it really interesting that historically, most of the artwork that we have access to dissecting that we really culturally love in more of the Western world is always coming from pain, always being
Mm.
informed by somebody who's just so trapped that they're, all they have left to do is just like, create this like whatever magnum opus, this song, this book, this like out of this heartbreak. Because it's like when you're so longing for something that you've lost or that's been ripped away with you, the sitting down and writing about them and drawing them or the thing or whatever, it's like that's that last little bit of hanging on to that we have. And it helps
100%.
all of us through grief and through, like, I know for a fact that I've had moments of grief that if it weren't for that right song at that right moment, like I don't know how I would have gotten through my day.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm very curious around there being more art created from joy.
Yeah.
and the relevance of like, it's something I think a lot about because yeah, I think we're just moving into like really neat areas of creativity. And I think that people are starting to become more and more and more comfortable with participating in intuition, and the
Yes.
internet's helping. And, there's more of like, yeah, there's just a lot more conversation happening around it. I think dimensionally, like there's lots, I think that are, I think as people find more and more meaning and are more actively participating in meaning, then our
Hmm.
collective becomes more meaningful. And then that intuition becomes more accessible. So if there's a little bit of a meniscus between me and say like our guides or our team or our crew or our angels or our ancestors, however you want to see it, the more we believe in participating in that world, the closer their access to being supportive is.
Yes.
So I've heard some really cool like theories that way back in the day, like if you're reading from like the time of like the Bible being written, or if you're hearing the oral histories of a lot of indigenous peoples from say a couple thousand years ago, there's a lot of like, yeah, and the guy just like, it was crazy. He was farming out in his field and he just like took off and flew, or this angel dropped down, or this or that, or like there was a
Hmm.
thunderbird and it did the thing. And like when the chief died, the whales and there's these
Yeah.
beautiful magical stories. But there's these theories that because people lived more in a field of belief, that there was actually more access, that there was more shit going on.
So the
But
reality of it,
because
seeing it.
yeah, and
Yeah.
because our realities like really squeezed it out for
Yeah.
whatever reason, whether it happened on purpose or by accident or whatever, who knows.
Yeah.
But we're starting to like open back up to it. So it's
Yeah.
it's like a fun moment because the more we're navigating in that world, like the more synchronicities and shit might start getting wild. I don't know.
Totally. It already has.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I
Yeah.
feel like we're just at the beginning, but
Yeah.
what it makes me think again, makes me think of the cloak, right? It's like for a while we've really been keeping our cloak tight,
Yeah.
closed tightly. And
Yeah.
it's like the more we're expanding and having access to taking out the cloak off sometimes or loosening the cloak a little, the more we start to see more of what's really at play or
Hmm.
what's really involved here. And I feel like,
Hmm.
at least personally, I'm just at the beginning of grasping or making sense of or understanding without needing to consciously understand what's really at play here. And I think that's so fascinating and so cool.
It's the funnest. And I think that the fastest way to like, I mean, when I listen to people talk like this, my brain, I want to get better at it faster.
Hmm.
I'd be like, I want to be able to do that tomorrow. Like I like to run before I can walk a bit.
Hmm.
And the fastest track way of getting from like dipping into it to like being able to actually like, pick up the tin can telephone and like fully having like a kind of interesting conversation with the subconscious is
Yes.
making friends with the shit that you do not like about yourself.
Yeah.
Like the
100%.
more friendly that I get with the parts of myself that I have a really hard time accepting, the faster it happens. And like
Hmm.
I have places in my reality of how I participate in reality right now that I feel very stuck. Like there are a few things in my experience where I have no idea how I'm going to get to the other side of them. And I am still using coping mechanisms. I'm
Yeah.
still like, and I know I'm not stuck, but all I know is that the more I can make that version of me that's like holding myself back, the more I can make her my friend and the more
Hmm.
I can love her and have compassion for whatever her problem is, the faster I'm going to get through it.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's really not easy work to do.
It's
And
not.
we're all doing it, like
Exactly.
I have
Exactly.
access to all this and I still am actively like my resistance in this particular area is so loud, even
Yeah,
though I have access to all these tools. It's like I could get over it tomorrow and it could take me 10 more years and
yeah,
that's okay. But
exactly.
yeah.
And I think that's the important piece. That's okay, right? The
That's
more we're
okay.
able to surrender into not needing it to happen right now or
David feels
needing it
good
to
hearing you
fix.
say that.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Because again, it's that grace, right? It's like, yeah, we're humans. We have the cloak on tight. We have the ability to loosen the cloak or take it off. And we're constantly going to be exposed to these places of resistance. And I find the more we do this exploration, the more we're met with those places, but the more grace we're able to then have for it. Like, all I have is right now, whether this takes 10 more minutes or 10 more years.
Hmm.
Yes, there's frustration, and of course there's frustration. Of course there's a part of me that wants to have it happen right now, but also we have all the time we need, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. And I want to thank you again because, like, I've had so much happen and open up in my life in the last 6 months, and it was because of this like huge layer of resistance that I was having. And I got to a point where I realized like there was just no, I didn't matter what I threw at it, it was not budging. Where the one I'm talking about right now feels like quite fluid, and it's like,
Mm,
I know that it's just a matter of like kind of phasing through it still. Where
yeah.
the other one felt like a real solid like barrier. And I went into the daydreaming state and I was like, hey guys, like I don't know what to do here. And it was very clearly like, you need help.
Hmm.
Like you need help with this one, kiddo. Like you don't got this. And it's
Yeah.
okay. Again, it's okay.
Exactly.
It's okay,
Exactly.
but you
Yeah.
don't got this. And I was like, well, what kind of help? And then it was the feeling of like, well, just all that needed to happen was you in this state accepting that you needed help. So like that we're done here. We're done. And it was just
Ooh,
like
cool.
game over.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay. And it was 2 days later, I was sitting out on my deck having a cigarette. And I was just like, oh, like I wonder what this is gonna look like. And you walked past me. And I
Yeah.
live in the like, I mean, I don't live like nobody walks by
No, exactly.
because I have one neighbor who had just, like moved in, whatever, not that long ago. And then you just happened to walk by the deck. And I had that feeling where it was like, that's your help.
Yeah.
And it was, and then we worked together and I was able to move through it. But like, boy, did I ever need you to hold my hand through that one. And it
Hmm.
was like, whatever, 45 minutes later,
Yep. Exactly.
the got through the wall. But like, wow, it's just incredible the work that you do.
Thank
That
you.
felt
Yeah.
catastrophic to me.
Yeah.
And it
It
was
was,
literally like 45 minutes later. I was like,
yeah.
okay,
And
yeah,
transformed. Good to go.
good to go. Yeah, back up and running again. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm so grateful for the work that you do because we are operating in a system where, yeah, it's like we don't know exactly what the mechanics are, what's going on, but
Yeah. And
kind
to
of like I
have,
use electricity every day and none of us really know what it is.
yeah,
So like
exactly.
I'm glad you decided to work with the unknowable.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. I'm glad I did too. And I'm also so grateful for more and more people being willing to dip into the unknowable and then to have people like you share your perspective, because that to me is what expands our understanding of our own experiences, to really just see as many perspectives as possible, right? Because,
Mhm.
yes, you got nudged to get help, which sometimes it's important. We don't have
Mhm.
to do everything ourselves. And
Mhm.
sometimes we get to a point where we're really picky with who we work with, right? And
Mhm.
and then it's like, oh, but when I need the help, it's there. And it doesn't take long because all it took was a shift in perspective. And then
Mhm.
boom, everything gets to change, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it's so important for us to be able to expand our understanding of our experience by hearing from other people like you, because it opens us up to recognizing something else is possible. And that's what we're here to do, is to recognize ongoingly that something else is possible, especially
Mhm.
when we meet those moments of resistance.
And it simultaneously closes us off to being preyed upon.
Yes. Yeah.
So it also protects us from the
Yeah.
other side of it, which
Yeah.
is why this work, like working with you and then doing the daydreaming work, to me is so opportunistic
Hmm.
because it's having that twofold.
Yeah.
Like the thing that irritates me the most are young people who are seeking on this path, and then they go the like, the whatever, I'm going to take a plane to South America and go
Mhm.
do the maybe ayahuasca, whatever. And there's so many gorgeous moments where that's helped so many people, but it's not the safest. There are a lot of predators and a lot of energies around that.
Yeah.
And it's not as simple as just going into your own heart, through your own heart,
Yeah.
where you're
Agreed.
accessing the same thing that's even more customized and tailored to you, as
Yeah.
opposed to like leveraging an external thing. Where my guidance system has explained it to me, it's like hacking into the system
Yeah.
as opposed to just like going through the front door.
Yeah.
So your
That's
heart's the front
true.
door, and just you walk in whenever you want to.
Yeah.
All it takes is some birds singing or some music, and just doesn't it,
Yeah.
it doesn't take much. And it's more subtle. So you gotta, it takes a little bit of tuning, but it's right there, as opposed to like, I'm just gonna hack right in.
Yeah.
And I think that the key difference is, like imagine somebody who's experienced some like really big childhood trauma and they want to work through it, where when you go in through your heart knows exactly what to show you, how to show you, what part of it's going to be helpful. It doesn't want to re-traumatize you. Or if you want to
Exactly.
hack your way in and you're like, oh, I want to know what happened, and then this re-traumatization occurs, which is very common in these situations, and then you're being sent home and you're just a big gaping wound,
Yeah.
and that transformation hasn't happened.
Yeah.
You've just face shoved yourself into it, and you are literally like in scenarios like ripe for that predatory.
Yeah.
People know how to sniff that out,
Yeah.
dude. Like,
Oh,
yeah,
it's
it's
so
like candy
challenging to
to
watch.
them. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. It's so challenging.
So the other side of this too is it's very, very protective work. And the more time you
Yeah.
spend in the gym of practicing daydreaming, the more the more protected from being preyed upon you
Yeah.
become.
Yeah.
You become immune
Totally.
to it. People can't even see you.
Exactly.
You're operating on such a different bandwidth from them.
That's
They
it.
can't even perceive you.
Yeah. Well, and that's it. To me, what I'm hearing and feeling and what you're describing is the difference in between navigating life as a sovereign being versus which vibrates at a very different frequency than navigating life as, I don't want to use the word victim here, but in
I
a
think
raw,
so.
it's like raw,
I can
open
admit that I was
victim.
like that then in my
Yeah.
early 20s. Yeah, like
Yeah.
mucking around. Like,
And
yeah,
it's like always looking outside of yourself
yeah,
for, yeah,
yeah.
either to blame or to receive the help you need, which, rooted in developmental trauma. There's so much there I could talk
I
to,
have
but
so much compassion for myself, like going through that. And like I did it,
yeah.
and it's like, I
Mm-hmm.
think that's why I'm sensitive to it, because it's like been there, done that, bought the t-shirt,
Yeah,
got
exactly.
myself into shitty situations, like for sure, got hurt, got preyed upon, like whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think you're right. It's when you're still at the point where you're looking for the external fix.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
That's that simple. I think you're right. That's what I
Yeah.
was doing for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
I wanted somebody to fix me.
Exactly.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. That's gonna backfire for sure. Yeah.
Yikes.
Well, I
Absolutely.
feel like we could talk forever. I'm like, oh, we didn't talk about this, we didn't talk about this, but we'll just have to save it for another time.
We could do it again. Yeah.
Yeah. And I definitely will link email, website,
Hmm.
PDF potentially, or at least email for you to then get the
Hmm.
PDF if people are interested in the PDF. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, I definitely encourage people to check out also your artwork, because your artwork speaks in so many different ways. It's so powerful what you're doing through your art. And I'm
Thank
excited
you.
to see how it continues to evolve with you tapping more into the joy and the expansiveness that
Yeah.
and the messages that can come through that, because I
Oh,
already
yeah.
feel that. I feel that in your work already. So
Yeah, it'll
yeah.
be interesting. Like I might take a journey out and realize I was already doing it and come back
Yeah.
around full circle, or like I might tap and do some really weird and wild and cool shit. But yeah, I feel
Yeah.
almost like vomitously, like,
Ooh.
you know what I mean? Like I'm
Yeah.
definitely at that moment where I'm like, okay, let's see what happens here. But it's
Yeah.
really intimidating. So yeah,
That's great. That's a perfect edge to
stay
explore.
tuned.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Deanna.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks for calling.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope that this episode has provided you with new perspectives and insights, and if you haven't already, head to my website to download the experiential guide. Until the next time, I invite you to continue to pause and notice.